So we're back after a little bit of technical difficulty. Nathan was just starting to answer our first question, so thankfully we didn't get very far before Google Hangouts dropped out on us. But once again, thanks for joining us, Nathan. And to jump into the first question again, if you were starting over with zero products at the point where you started building products, so you were a freelancer, freelance product designer, web designer, and you knew everything you knew now, but you still only had side time, so nights and weekends and things like that. How would you approach things strategically to start building your products, and maybe what topic would you pick? Would you pick the same way you did before? What would you do differently next time?
Yeah, so to start on topic, I would stick with the same topic, which in my case was designing iPhone applications, because that's something that I knew really well, and it uh, applied to my day job as well. So I was spending all my time designing iPhone apps, and then what I learned there, I could put on the side into, the book that I was working on. So I'd say it's good to have plenty of overlap there, and that way, what you do with the of your time benefits your side project, even if it's just with like learning or making a few connections or something like that. Um, Other things that I would do, well, I would start gathering email subscribers much sooner. I put it off because I was worried that I wouldn't actually finish the book. I tried to write books plenty of times before the App Design Handbook, and so I didn't want to tell anyone about it until I had made enough progress on the book that I knew I was going to finish. And so for me, that I got about three-quarters of the way done before I, even put up a landing page or anything like that. And that's not the recommended way to go. But if you're worried about finishing like I was, um, that obviously works. I don't think it hurt me too much in the long run. As far as like setting aside dedicated time or making it work when you only have, say, an hour a day, is I would make sure to schedule that time out so that it's not, oh, I'm going to work on my book when I have availability or, when things happen. Because if you have like a family and little kids, just it's really hard. Like time doesn't just happen. You don't find random time to work on your side project. You have to make that time. And so, I'd probably say that like scheduling out 45 minutes or an hour every morning before you go to work or before you start the things that pay the bills is probably better than just trying to let it fit in at the end of the day. The other thing I would say, and people might disagree with me on this, but I would prioritize that side project and give it your best time. Like I'm most productive first thing in the morning, and so I would give my best, most productive time to that side project, and give the rest of your time to the day job or something like that. And that's just because for me, going full time on products was the most important thing, and so that had the most long term benefit for me and my family, and so I took it seriously and gave it my most productive time. Um, yeah, does that
So a
answer
lot
the
of these
question, Alex?
things, yeah, well, I mean, a lot of these things sort of tie into the same core idea of treating it like a real job. If you want a real job outcome, you need to treat it like a real job. I'm wondering if you can give me an example of a time where you didn't follow one of those guidelines in it and it sort of bit you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first three books that I tried to write were definitely an example of that. I would I relied on my current motivation in order to make progress on the book, and so I had this idea. I got really really excited, and I'd write out a sample chapter or an outline, and I'd start writing the first chapter, and I would never make it past like the first or second page on each of these books, because the next day the interest would kind of fizzle out, and um, it just wasn't nearly as exciting. And so imagine if you did that on a client project where, like, I would get pitched lots of client projects where they're really exciting at first, and you dive into them, you make good progress, and then things kind of stall out. The client changes the scope. Maybe they're not quite as much fun to work with as you first thought. So imagine if on the client project you like said, I'll work on it just when I'm motivated, or we're just working on it right at the beginning. And if you let your output follow your current motivation, you would be a terrible freelancer. You'd be a terrible employee because you wouldn't get anything done long term. But people do that all the time with their side projects, and that's what I did with my side projects for a long time. And that's why my first 5 side projects never. Not only did they not make any money, but they never got anywhere close to a state where they could make money because I didn't take it seriously.
Excellent. I'm wondering, sort of to go back to the topic question, you said that you would have still picked iOS design since that was your focus, like a normal work-wise, client work-wise, and things like that as your first product. But you did make a shift. Authority was the first shift away from design-related stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, all along, I was fascinated by the world of marketing and how to get there, how to get people to even know that you exist. And so once that was just this huge black box to me. I didn't understand it at all. And then once I figured it out and finally learned about teaching as a way to build an audience and sell products and all that, then I wanted to tell everybody about that. But I was really careful to not make that shift to talking about marketing until I'd done it in some other audience as well. And so, or I guess I didn't want to be the person who learned everything about marketing while building a marketing related products and a marketing and writing about marketing. I didn't want to just be aggregating other people's advice. I wanted my own experiences and my own stories to tell. And so even though I had been fascinated by marketing all along, I made sure that I wrote 2 books on design and did 2 product launches and build audiences around all of that before I allowed myself to go into the topic that I'm most passionate about. Another person who did this is Sean McCabe. He blogs at seanwest.com. And his first thing, I guess, where he kind of cut his teeth is on design and hand lettering. And so he does some truly amazing work. And he put out this course. He actually followed a lot of stuff in Authority, and I got to help him with his pricing and packaging. And his course did insanely well. I think it sold $100,000 worth in the first 3 days after launch.
Wow.
And yeah, it's just completely ridiculous. And he built up this big audience of like 15,000 subscribers, and so he learned all these marketing and business things that he wasn't really talking about. He covered them a little bit. But then after he had all that success on the lettering and design side of things, that's when he pivoted into talking about marketing and business, which is his passion even more so than the lettering and design stuff. But he wasn't going to start, a business blog or a marketing blog until he'd proven himself that he and proven to his audience and had all the all of his own experiences and reputation and all of that. Because you don't want to be the beginner who just jumps in and starts just copying what everybody else is saying, and that's not a good way to build an audience. You've got to have your own experiences and all your own examples and everything.
I think what's interesting in that is neither of you guys were experts, so to speak. You went out and applied what you learned and developed practices and methods beyond that you were able to then repeat consistently. So that made you more of an expert than the average person. I think a lot of times people undervalue their expertise, especially when it's something that's relatively new. They compare their expertise in one thing to the expertise they have in something that they've been working on for a very long time, which is actually a really interesting shift into another question. This is a little bit longer. I'm going to try and summarize some of the backstory. But the person who wrote in with this question is an independent game developer. So they were actually doing consumer-facing, the hits-based business, the stuff that we try and stay as far away from as possible because it puts all of the risk on you and so much reward in the hands of publishers to say yes or no or put effort into your product or not. But this person took the shift, started shifting focus away from making the games and more to extracting code in terms of templates that could be sold online, templates and tools and things like that, and has been putting the things that we teach in Just Fucking Ship and that you teach in Authority as sort of the playbook for building his audience. And what he's looking for is thoughts on how you would apply the Authority playbook to building an audience for game developers, people who are potentially interested in the source code and the templates that go into making games. How would you approach that if you were in this person's shoes?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is that sounds like a fantastic audience because those people are very active online. You can find tons of blogs and communities that already exist. You don't want to pick an audience that doesn't use the internet or is hard to find. And so that's good already. The other thing is there's already a mindset of sharing lots of things for free, and that is going to help you build an audience because there's already kind of that network there. People always think that, if everything in this market is given away for free, that means there's not room for a product. But really, if there's lots of things given away for free, it means it's easy to build an audience, and anywhere you have an audience, there's room for a product. So starting out, I would give away as much as possible. A very easy thing to do. Well, let's say I would try to develop a really simple or a really small relationship with one of these existing popular game development blogs. And then I would write a detailed tutorial on how to do something in, whether it's, like Unity or one of these other game development languages, whatever you're working in there. So you write up that tutorial, and then so that tutorial in itself is really valuable and useful. Make it good enough that it could be like a chapter in a book. You've put that much effort into it. And then at the end of it, you can do two different calls to action. One, you could say, if you want the source code from this entire project, click here. Or you could say, I'm writing a book on this topic, go here to learn more about it. Or you could do both, actually, because they're going to attract slightly different people.
One of the things that he asks as sort of like a secondary question is about framing the product itself. Are people going to buy just a lump of source code, whether it's a template or a plugin or a patch or whatever it is, or should he go the route of wrapping it in an email course on how to build a certain thing with that tool as sort of a complement, with that code set as a complement? What do you think the advantage is to? It sounds like you're already headed in that direction in terms of describing the marketing portion of it. Build something educational and then the code component goes along with it. What about the final product itself?
Well, so before we get to the final product, those things that I'm talking about linking to wouldn't be products. They'd be landing pages to give away something more for free. So the times I've had the most success building an audience is when I've given away something completely for free, so that's an epic blog post, and then I give away something else linked to from that, which is usually in trade for an email address, but it's also free. And then the third step is you sell the product. So I would give away, say, like the sample code from that tutorial, but I would do it on a landing page where it's like, hey, put in your email address and we'll send you the sample code. And then there'd also be some information about, and you'll get more tutorials from us and information about the course that we're working on, or the full library or something like that. And so you want to have a few opportunities up front of delivering a lot of value before you even get close to the pitch. And then as far as packaging final product, I don't have a lot of experience with selling code directly. So I would probably take a hybrid approach where I would sell the library of pricing. So you do the library of code that's really useful, and then bundled with that, or these would be two independent products. You would have the training course or the book on how to use it and how to implement it. Let's say you sell the code for $75 and you sell the training course for $75. And then you could do a combination package where it's get both for $100, where you're giving them a pretty massive discount for getting both. You know the people who get both are going to be more successful. And it's kind of like a little bit of decoy pricing, where the combo package is such a good deal that why not get it?
Right.
And I think that would do really well. So as like a immediate guess of the best way to do it, that's what I would do. I would make sure to sell training as well as code.
One thing that I'll add to that, because I think that's really good advice, is to consider the format. If the thing that sort of pops in your mind is to create a book or written material, whether it's an email course that's dripped out over time or a book itself, I think code lends itself to be something that could be taught with screencasts, which could potentially be a whole lot easier to produce and a whole lot easier for people to learn from. So again, that comes down to use both your strengths as well as the strengths of the product and the medium, rather than try and write narrative around code examples, which can be really, most coding books are very, very difficult to follow, partly because they're poorly written, but largely because the format doesn't really match what it is that you're trying to learn how to do.
Yeah, and if you want just a tip on creating good screencasts, what I like to do if I'm doing code screencasts is I will code through a section of it and then record myself coding through that exact same thing that I just coded. The benefit to that is I don't look like an idiot because I get stuck somewhere or get lost on some little thing. You can always edit later. Another thing that I like to do is record the same screencast twice. I do this a lot with my Photoshop tutorials, where I'll record myself teaching, how to do this thing with layers, for example. And then great, that screencast came out at 6 minutes for that little section, because I'm working off of an outline I typed up earlier that's really rough. But then I'll go through and I'll record that exact same thing a second time. And this is without writing a script or anything like that, but just by doing it a second time a few minutes later, I'm that much more familiar with the material. And I can usually teach that same material in, say, 4 minutes instead of 6 minutes. It ends up being much more precise and just better education. But I still didn't have to write a script to do a ton of editing. I just basically recorded my trial run and then recorded the final thing. And so then you can record, say, 10 minutes of video in 30 to 40 minutes of total time. And so it ends up being a really efficient way to create training material.
That's really good advice. Do you record the screencast and the voiceover all at once?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's part of the reason why I need to do it in 2 passes.
I was just listening to Dan Benjamin, who runs the 5x5 podcast network. There's a new podcast out it's called the Podcast Method, and he talks specifically about when he was working with the folks at PeepCode, who, as far as I'm concerned, produce some of the best technical screencasts ever. And one of the tricks that they came up with was to record the screencast in one pass and then do a voiceover completely separate, because then you also don't pick up the keyboard clicking and stuff like that, as well as the
Right.
ability to tighten things up. Even if you do record the audio the first time through, that's your practice run. Record the second time just the narration. It's like you're more laser focused on it. Potentially yet another way to tighten that up. But all ways just make screencasts that much better.
Yeah. And another thing I would like about that is that if you don't have the audio track running the entire time, because sometimes when you're doing slightly repetitive tasks, you tend to, I don't know, be talking your way through it. And so I will, in a few screencasts where it got really repetitive, I would make sure to shut up, and then I'd cut out that part of the audio track later, and then speed up a section or like kind of skip ahead. And so I would say make sure to rewatch your screencasts, do some editing, and see if there's some times that you can, that it'll make a lot more sense or be more enjoyable to watch if you cut out sections or do a little section that double having makes that easier.
Yeah. Totally switching gears to a next question, and this is one that we answered last week as well, about paid advertising and how you use it. I'm curious if you have used any paid advertising, and if you have, what's been the most effective and what's been the least?
All right, so paid advertising. Yeah, that's been quite a topic for me. So I tried, so I've done Twitter and Facebook ads, and then I've done retargeting on a handful of platforms. So I don't have a ton of experience with it, but I've spent probably, I don't know, maybe $2,000 on paid advertising over the last couple of years, which relative to my product income is pretty small, but I feel like I've given it a fair shot a few times. My best experience ever was also one of my early experiences, and so now I just feel like a gambler going back to Vegas trying to recreate like that win. So I had my Photoshop for web design course coming out. So this was January, and so I ran Twitter ads pointing to a landing page that I had put together to capture email addresses, basically saying the course is coming out, put in your email address. Like, to get a good performing tweet, I probably had maybe 6 or 7 different variations of the same tweet that I was for images, generally with an image performed quite a bit better, and I tried an assortment of images. One thing that I found is once one tweet started doing well and started getting more favorites and likes, it just did a lot better. And so, it might even be worth it to ask a few friends to, to favorite. I don't know the details of it, but it was interesting to see that the one tweet that did the best beat out the others by such a big margin that I can't believe it was just a result of like a slightly better image or slightly better copy. I think that some of the social signaling factors had more to do with it as well.
Sure.
The results of that, I spent $300 and got 300 email addresses, and that was pretty awesome. I should pull up the exact. Well, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but then I launched to my entire list and went through the whole launch sequence, and those 300 email addresses were included in it. And the result is that, so after the launch, I went back and filtered out all the. I compared all the people who were on that Twitter ad list to the people who bought. And I don't remember the number of copies I sold, but they purchased $3,300 worth of product from that one launch. And so just in the short term, from that one launch, I had made 11x my ad spend, which was amazing. Like, once I calculated that out, because I was kind of skeptical, like, is this going to work? Is this $300 going to pay off? And then I calculated it out and went, whoa, I just made $3,300 off of a $300 ad spend. This is amazing. We're gonna, you know, put as much money into this slot machine as
Keep
possible.
doing it, yeah.
Yeah. And so I already had a two launch and I was doing a full launch a month later. And so for that full launch, I ran a bunch more ads. I probably spent maybe $600 or $700, and I broke even on that second set. I could never recreate the $1 to $1.50 per email address price that I'd been getting earlier. I was paying more like $4 an email address, and the quality seemed lower, and they didn't buy nearly as much, even though this new group got the same launch sequence, and that was really frustrating. I still came out ahead on my total ad spend for that product, but only because I got that 11x return the first time around. So that was the experience, and since then I've tried it maybe 3 or 4 more times to try to recreate that in some way, and I feel like it's been getting worse every time, where now if I'm buying email addresses on Twitter for less than, say, $3 to $4 a piece, I'm pretty happy. And then, I don't know, it's just not working out as well. So
I'm curious, what's the thing you're having people opt into with the Twitter ads? Are they signing up for one of your email courses? Are they signing up for a download? What are you actually having them convert for?
So I've tried a couple different things, and I haven't tried this out as much as I should. But let's see. So the first one that was so successful, and this is actually kind of one of my favorite ones to use, where the incentive was sign up to hear when the course is ready. Because then they're not signing up for a free guide or to get something right then. They're signing up to hear about this thing that they might want to buy later. And so there's some intent there already.
So it's less conversions, but more intent.
Yeah. And actually, I find that they do pretty well as far as conversions, which doesn't make sense to me on like a human behavior level. But I have a lot of data now on landing pages and conversion rates and that kind of thing. It helps that I run a company that, that's half of what we do with ConvertKit. But I can get 25 to 40% conversion rates depending on the traffic source with something that's like sign up to hear when this book is available. So if people are stuck on what their incentive on their landing page should be, that's actually a pretty decent place to start. But then other ones I've tried have been a free email course on that would promote authority eventually. So it would be on self-publishing or better email or growing an audience. I've tried an assortment of things. Most of the experiments I feel like I probably haven't given enough time or enough money to in order to really know that they're not working. But they weren't clear home runs initially, and so I kind of would drop off on them. Other things that I've tried is I have an ongoing Facebook ad where I uploaded all the authority customers, and I spend a little bit basically targeting them for ConvertKit. So I spend maybe, I don't know, it's probably like $50 a month because it's only a couple thousand people that I'm targeting on Facebook. I have this other product to help authors.
Are you using the option, Brennan mentioned this last week, where you can not just target the people that have bought, but you can target their network? Have you been experimenting with that as well?
In this case, I've just been doing the people that have bought.
The direct.
Because I'm targeting ConvertKit. What I think I would do, if I were to target their network, I'd promote authority, I think. I would upload all the people who purchased authority and then target people like them or their network. And that I haven't tried. And the reason was, up until recently, without doing some fancy stuff, it was hard to do conversion tracking through Gumroad. About 2 months ago, I think they made it really easy, and I just haven't haven't come back to that yet.
Got it.
Um,
Any attempts
Retargeting
that
will.
you've mentioned that you've had not the inability to recreate the Grand Slam. Have you had any attempts that were just like a total flop?
I think, yeah, I think for the second launch, or the launch of the second edition of Authority, I spent probably about $300. I'm a timid gambler, so I'll pull the plug relatively early. I couldn't beat $5. I couldn't get an email address for less than $5. Um, and I just thought this is not working out. And I don't know that I even ran the numbers on how many people ended up buying. Like all the initial signs were pointing to this is not good, and I didn't follow through on it.
Sure. So the bet was too rich for your blood.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with making that call early.
So yeah, paid acquisition. I mean, it's something that everybody should experiment with. Retargeting has paid off decently well. It's okay enough that I spend as much on retargeting for ConvertKit as I can. We don't have that many visitors to the site, and so the pool is relatively small. So it's probably only $100 a month that I spend there, but those pay off.
Cool. Well, and to wrap up today's call, a question about, since we've been talking about books, your favorite nonfiction book to recommend, other than Authority, of course. Your favorite nonfiction book to recommend, or maybe the one you buy as a gift most often.
Let's see. A few recently. It all depends on who it's for. For somebody who's like totally new to business in the whole world, I might get Chris Guillebeau's The $100 Startup. It doesn't go deep into anything in particular, but there's some really good topics in there about finding business that overlaps your interests with what there's actually demand for in the world. And it's a quick and easy read, and I like it. I'd still go back to, it might be kind of a cliche answer, but it changed my entire worldview, and so I'd go back to Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. Because before reading that book, I did not know that any of this world existed. My worldview involved, get a job, maybe start a little company that, for all practical purposes was identical to a job. And, that was you advance in your career, and those are your options. And so when I first read that book, it had the biggest impact as far as showing me that there was an entirely different way to live and earn a living. So if you haven't read, I don't know who hasn't read that book now, but
I'm always amazed
I reread it probably once a year. There's a lot of stuff in there now that I would disagree with, or not necessarily disagree with, but I think there's better ways to implement it now. But I still get something different out of it each time I read it, and I read it about once a year because the different sections mean something different. Other times when I would gloss over, like, some of the lifestyle design stuff after you have the finances figured out. Like the first time I read it, I kind of glossed over that because that was so far from where I was. Whereas the most recent time I read it, that's what really stood out to me, and that's what I really got. That's where.
Yeah, that's the genius of how Tim. Book. Are you still with us?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I lost you for a second, but I just heard you. You still there?
Okay, good. I'm curious. You said that the 4-Hour Workweek was sort of a worldview changer for you, and I know I've heard the same from a lot of people. Can you remember the first piece of actionable advice from the 4-Hour Workweek that you actually took and implemented?
Um, that's a good question. The one that always stood out to me, and um, I was talking to Tim on the phone like maybe 6 months ago, and so this is the one that I told him about. Is he has this line in there about how there's one category. I'm totally gonna misquote this, but there's one category of products that has all the margins of uh, like all the margins of drug dealing, but without any of the risk, side effects, and having to deal with people. Um, and he said, and that's info products. And that kind of stood out to me. I was like, because I always like the idea of a high margin business, and so I always paid attention to that. And so 6 months ago or a year ago, when I was talking to Tim on the phone, I was like, I told him like that line always stood out to me. And last year I made $250,000 off of selling, courses and what are effectively info products. Um, and so that one part of it, always stuck with me. I don't know that I probably would have eventually found this category of products, but it made me pay attention to it and know from the beginning that, hey, this is probably the highest margin business you can get into.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, I think you've got a plane to catch. So I'm gonna
Pretty
thank you
soon.
for taking time, getting ready to head to the airport, taking time at the end of your vacation, spend some time with some folks and share what you know. Thanks again to all the live viewers today, to all the people that will be watching this in the future, people that will be participating in the Gift of Business Bundle. This has been a blast. And from Nathan and myself and Amy and Brennan, we can't thank you enough, and we'll see you again soon.